Samuel Johnson, in his essay on fiction, published in The Rambler in 1750, marks the beginning of the literary criticism and of form other than poetry and drama. Rise of fiction and ultimately novel in the mid-18th century was an important literary form. Like other kind of art, fiction depends on the idea of mimesis, presenting stories which imitate nature and or real life. Unlike poetry and drama, fiction depends on the principle of realism. And what's that realism? Presenting stories of individual to readers as if these individuals were the real people. Realism of fiction blurred the difference between imagined world of art and the real world of history and biography. Fiction also depended on using language that aimed for transparency, unlike poetic language. Like in poetry, which we call attention to itself as a creation of art or artifice rather than the language of common speech. The language of prose fiction work to call attention to the reality of plot, character, and away from the work as an imaginative creation. Samuel Johnson follows Plato in insisting that criticism of literature, and especially fiction, has to be based on an assessment of its novel, of its moral effect, like what does the work do to the reader. So according to this view, good art always has a positive moral message and bad art has a bad message, which encourages its reader to emulate negative or destructive behavior. Novels are potentially more harmful than poetry because novels are the more realistic form and thus more easily believed or mistaken for description of real life. The realism of fiction for Samuel Johnson also ties the genre more closely to the actualities of human existence because they do not contain the wild strain of imagination of poets and does not rely on supernatural or on inexplicable events. Fiction comes from authors who have direct knowledge of human nature gained from intercourse with other humans rather than from writers closeted way from the normal world inventing impossible scenarios. Samuel Johnson argues that because a novel copies easily recognizable event and characters, any reader can judge the accuracy of the representation and evaluate a novel according to that standard. Because they are accessible and realistic, novels appears to a wide audience, and the novelists are thus obliged to be aware of the power of their creations wielded, and novels are often read by the young and ignorant, and Johnson warns that they have the power to lodge ideas firmly in unformed or immature mind. So novelists must take care to choose noble subjects and positive morals. According to Samuel Johnson, the rule of realism should be bent so that novels deviate from nature whenever it is necessary to present the proper outcome where wickedness is punished and virtue rewarded. Samuel Johnson further argues that ancient Greeks and Romans provided best models for any literary form or art, and those works which have stood with the test of time, have proved themselves useful rather than harmful or to generate after and to generation and from generation after generation of readers. Thus, any literary critic or writer must have a thorough knowledge of the classical literary tradition.